welcome. This is Dr. Stephen Greer. This is Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer, and we're on the World Puja Network. And I'd like to thank the great people at World Puja for hosting us every 2 weeks to give you an update on CSETI and the OrionProject.org. And I'm joined today with Linda Willitts, who is here to discuss the amazing recent events that have happened with contact with the CSETI diplomatic contact team. Thank you, Linda, for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
So it's an exciting show today because we have just released at CSETI.org a report on the contact that happened a couple of months ago, 3 months ago now, at Joshua Tree National Park, which is an 800,000-acre national park in the high desert in Southern California. And we, as you all know, have a team that we train every 4 or 5 times a year where we go out under the stars for about a week together. And every year since 1996, pretty much, we've been going out to Joshua Tree National Park as one of our venues and have had just astonishing contact events happen. I think probably the most important contact event in the history of this subject has just occurred, and we have released a very detailed report, which you can see at CSETI.org, on this extraterrestrial diplomat who visited us at Joshua Tree that was photographed by Raven Nabulsi, who is a long-term and very trusted member of our team, who is on the board of the OrionProject.org. And I want to go through this because of the significance of this and the historic significance of it. This is being sent to a number of world leaders and also to the public at this time because we think that as I would say it, the veil is getting very thin, and the ET presence is not only obviously becoming more pronounced, but that what they're willing to do in terms of open diplomatic contact is ramping up in a way that we have never seen in the last 50 or 60 years of the modern era of ET contact. So it's quite historic, and that's what we want to share with you today. And one of the things that I want to set the stage a little bit for this, and, you know, most of the people, when they look at the whole UFO subject, if you even deconstruct the language, UFO, unidentified flying object, well, in reality, the intelligence community created that name, and because they have not been unidentified since the 40s when we retrieved an extraterrestrial vehicle from Roswell, if not earlier. And they do not fly in any aerodynamic sense of the word because they use advanced physics that are not aerodynamically based. The only part of the UFO term that is accurate is, an object. But let's think about that for a minute. Most organizations have UFO in their title, whereas CSETI, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, has ET in its title. And the reason for that is that we're a person-oriented diplomatic team, not an object-oriented team. And this is something that isn't obvious. I mean, this is something that I rarely speak about, but I think it's time for me to speak about it. And that is that we really need to go from a materialistic, reductionist view of this issue to saying, I saw an object, to thinking about, well, who's inside the object and why are they here? I mean, it's very nice to see a UFO, and it's quite exciting and quite interesting, and we've certainly seen many of them in our expeditions. But what's more interesting is the contemplation of the fact that there are interstellar civilizations visiting Earth at this time in our history, which is a very critical moment in our evolution, and that there are intelligent life forms on board these, quote, UFOs. Now, of course, I've always said that there are 2 types of UFOs, the ones that are made by Lockheed Martin and Northrop in the aerospace industry, which are called alien reproduction vehicles, and that are completely man-made anti-gravity platforms that have been in existence since the 50s. And then there are the ones that are of interstellar origin, which are quite different and quite amazing in how they move and appear and disappear and materialize and dematerialize and what have you. And I think this gets into this whole concept of what are the technological requirements of being interstellar. And you've really got to take a big step out of the box to get your mind wrapped around this. And this is what I want to do for folks today. It's going to be a little bit mind-blowing, but I think it's time for us to know this. This is what all of our children and grandchildren should know, and this is certainly what we should have all known. Those of us who were born, like myself, in the 50s, by the time we hit grade school, we should have been learning this knowledge and science had it not been kept secret. And I want to go into this particularly with this audience at the World Puja Network because it involves so much the science of consciousness and the ancient Vedic concepts of awareness, except in a space-age way, and that is the interface between consciousness and thought and transdimensional technologies and linear space-time and science. And this is really what we're going to talk about because the photograph that you can now all see at CSETI.org proves what I'm about to discuss. And there's no question about the provenance or the origin of the photograph because we were all there when it was taken, and we know the woman who took it, who is absolutely trustworthy. Now, I think that this whole question of contact and how it might appear is really a central one because everyone's trying to put the ET reality into 20th and early 21st century human reality. But the problem with that is that it's too anthropocentric, and not only anthropocentric, but Western science-centered, where our science that is talked about, at least publicly, as opposed to what exists in the classified projects, is really something out of the dinosaur era. And I think that one of the things that we have to begin to contemplate is how will civilizations that are interstellar and moving through space at many, many times the speed of light, how will they appear? What would it be like? And I think this is something that's quite amazing to contemplate. And this is why I wrote my books that many of you have read, Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, my autobiography, but the most recent book, Contact, Countdown to Transformation, which goes into this in great detail because it's crossing into areas of the Vedic puja knowledge of science of consciousness, but it's also highly scientific, and it's a whole new science that's being developed by the knowledge that we're gaining from studying how extraterrestrial civilizations move across space-time. So I think that one of the things I would like for people to understand is that, if we were to go back, just think for a minute, and let's visualize going back. I'm sitting here near Thomas Jefferson's home here near the University of Virginia in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and think of going to Thomas Jefferson's Monticello in 1776 and showing up with an iPhone, or, for that matter, a flashlight. Well, you would look like something out of a absolutely science fiction or myth or unbelievable. In fact, it would be denied that it would be possible to have something like an iPhone, that you would have videos and could talk to people in other parts of the planet, et cetera, and so on. And that's only 200 and some years ago. Now extrapolate forward several thousand to several million years of technological and conscious evolution. That's what we're dealing with. So you're going to have to really have for scientists in particular, it's a very big dose of humility to contemplate what the technological capabilities are of those civilizations that have gone this way before us and who are capable of interstellar travel. So with that said, moving beyond the kick the tires of the UFO mindset, and let's start thinking about the people on board and sort of what their reality might be. We turn on a cell phone or a light switch as easily as not think anything about it, or hop on a jet and go to Europe. But these civilizations have technologies that interface with consciousness, thought, that dematerialize an entire spacecraft with beings on it and reappear in another point in space-time as easily as we get on a 747 and fly to Frankfurt. So I think that we have to begin to think, how might they appear? What does it mean? And this is really opening up a door to our future. At the same time, the future is now. Because in reality, the classified projects, the projects that I've been introduced to scientists who are very senior in these projects, have figured out all these sciences. And I mean, it's sad for the world that we don't have them. And, of course, we're working to fix that problem through the OrionProject.org. But in terms of contact with these civilizations that are here and who have been here, I believe, for thousands of years, if not millions of years, as observers of the Earth and perhaps guardians of life on Earth, I think we have to begin to contemplate, now that we've reached the point of evolution on our planet where we're united in a global village and going into space, they're here waiting for us to answer their presence, but answer their presence with some meaningful paradigm, operational paradigm, where we really understand how they get here, how they contact us, how they communicate, and how they might manifest around us, besides in something that's fully materialized, although that certainly has happened. So this photograph is really a doorway into that reality, which is why it's an amazing teaching moment that the ETs gave us in Joshua Tree. And I'm going to get into the detail of that. But first, I'd like for Linda to sort of describe where we were and what happened that day, because she was sitting right next to Raven Nabulsi when this photograph was taken, but it was also with me in the hour or so before the photograph happened, when there were some amazing things that transpired out in the desert.
Well, right. Dr. Greer and I and some other people walked out on the path that heads to the east, out across the desert from our contact site. And whenever we walk out there, it's always incredible because we always encounter ET beings and crafts out there, and they're always quite visible because they're lit up. I mean, there's been times in the past, in fact, that the beings have been so well lit that you could see their forms very easily. And one particular time we were out there and a jet came over and they dimmed down very perceptibly. And then when the jet passed, they brightened back up.
It was a military jet.
Yeah. Right, it was. It detected them, actually, and that's why it came over. But in any case, so we always have marvelous experiences when we go out onto this desert site. And so we walked out there, and we were in an etheric ET craft. It was glowing and sparkling all around us. It was very large, about as far as we could see, and there were beings as well. And we walked quite a ways out, maybe up to a quarter of a mile, out on this path, sandy path. And while we were standing there looking in the distance, we saw the laser. It was like a white laser shoot up at a bit of an angle. And Dr. Greer right away said, well, that indicates something's about to happen. And I don't really remember how long it was after that, but it wasn't too long after that we decided to walk back, and we were just beginning to turn to go back when suddenly there was this huge, massive burst of light. It was a little behind me, but some of the people that were behind me got a full view of it, and I spun around, didn't see the very beginning, but the people that did said it went up like a huge fountain of emerald green, way up into the sky, and by the time I turned around, the green, it was sort of like the fountain was spilling into like a giant half moon, only it was huge. It covered, it's hard to say.
It lit up the entire desert.
Right. It lit up the whole desert floor. It covered like our whole scope of vision when we were looking in that northerly direction. And then the colors started changing into pink and a gold and ultimately magenta. And it was just gorgeous, and it lasted for several seconds. And so we saw this as we were walking back up the path towards where our chairs were in the circle, and actually most of the people were still up there. Dr. Greer pointed out to me that he saw a sphere about the size of a silver dollar, a white sphere that was ahead of us, but heading in our same direction. And I actually just barely glimpsed it. When I glimpsed it, it was in the direction of. It was heading towards the direction of the bush that's in the photo of the ET being, and then I just glimpsed it very briefly. But then we got to our group, and we were talking about the brilliant display that we had all just seen in the north. No one missed it because it was just, even if with your back turned, you saw the glow of light. And so we were talking about that, and while we were talking about that, I heard, and I know most other people heard, like some voices talking from the vicinity of the path we had just entered the circle from. And there were no people over there. We had night vision. We double-checked with night vision because it was pitch dark, as a matter of fact, at this time. It was between 11 and 11:30 p.m. California time at this time. I clocked. I have an audio recorder that I keep with me all the time, and I clocked the time of the big display of light at 11:07 p.m. And so then we got back to the circle, and we were sitting around standing around actually talking, and we heard these voices, very distinct, several voices. I heard. Actually, it sounded like maybe 3 or 4, mostly higher pitch, like women's possibly, but then there was at least one lower one in it.
Right, it sounded like a male. And I should point out that, I have these fourth-generation night scopes and looked in the area. There were no humans there.
Right.
But this was dozens of people heard these beings speaking,
right,
but they weren't materialized.
Audible.
You couldn't see anything with the naked eye, but it was exactly in the area where this disc or orb had blipped in and out briefly. It was very strange. And one other comment, that the field that we had gone out into is the field that we, in 1996, saw this massive ET craft about 200 feet in diameter coming right out of the zenith of the sky and lit up the entire desert. It looked like a Hershey's Kiss and was sort of teal blue-green and went straight into the desert right out there. And we had been told that the ETs actually had a presence out in this part of Joshua Tree National Park. And in fact, the laser that we saw that shot up towards the sky right before the big burst of light was a whitish beam of light that from an area where there were no people, no humans at all, that was visible by many of us with the naked eye. Anyone looking in that direction saw it. And it came up from that ground where this craft had landed in 96, up towards the sky, and in the direction of where both the burst of light was and the subsequent orb that floated along in the desert leading up to the group when we were walking back.
Yes, so we had all these things happening, and then Dr. Greer said, let's all take our seats again. Well, not everyone moves at the same rate of speed in that situation, and Raven and I happened to be sitting side by side in the area of the circle that was facing east. And so we took our seats, and I heard Raven clicking away in the dark. It was pitch dark. You could not even see with the naked eye the chairs on the other side of the circle. There were no flashlights over in that area whatsoever. Raven was just sitting there clicking her camera without a flash into the darkness, which, we do that sometimes because you never know what you're going to pick up. And then we were having a lot of activity around us that night, as we always do at Joshua Tree, and it is the place of the Orion transmissions as well. So it's a highly active place. So that, I don't know, do you want me to talk about that night?
What's interesting about this is that it was a moonless night, November 17th, 2009. You can look it up. There's no moon up. And Raven had a digital camera, which was a single lens reflex, that she could adjust the aperture and the f-stop. So she had it open for 3.5 seconds. So she was holding the camera by hand. It wasn't on a tripod, and the lens was open for 3.5 seconds. And during that time, in an instant, this orb materialized and created a cone of light. Now, I want to describe this to you all now because this is what's really important. Again, there's no moon. Nobody has any flashlights on. There's an orb that appears, and in the photograph, when you go to the website, you can look at this. There's an orb that appears just to the left of a bush. And in the cone of light, there's so much light that it illuminates the chairs that have blankets and sleeping bags draped over them. And about 8 feet from where the orb is an ET being that's hovering in the air, suspended in this cone of light that is I estimate, around a 4 to 5 foot tall being, just outside our circle. And he's clearly humanoid, but not human. And this is the best photograph I have ever seen of an actual diplomatic contact event where an ET being has been photographed with this level of clarity. And what's important about this, well, there are a number of things. A, remember that this is a CSETI CE5 event, a close encounter of the fifth kind event, where we're setting up the protocols using electromagnetic tones and sensors and lasers and consciousness using remote viewing and connecting with thought and consciousness to the extraterrestrial communication systems and inviting them to come and meet with us in a diplomatic mission as representatives of humanity to these interstellar civilizations. So this is not a chance event. This is a planned event. And this ET, who I'm quite sure is a senior interplanetary ambassador, shows up and actually poses for the camera. Now, Raven had asked the ETs if they would help her get these photographs. And there's an aspect to this that's kind of strange because in consciousness and thought there's a lot of interactivity here. And the reason there is because interstellar, faster than the speed of light communication systems interface with directed thought. So just like we have coherent light makes a laser, coherent thought can be used within an expanded state of consciousness. This is where it gets very Vedic and very Puja on the World Puja Network, is why I want to talk about it, where it becomes a source of a directed energy field in thought that connects to the ET communication systems, and they pick that up as easily as our radar systems would pick up a 747 coming into John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. Now, what's important about that's what we teach during these expeditions, like the one we're going to do in the Outer Banks in April. We're going to go out there and do this for a whole week with those of you who want to join us. Now, what's interesting about this photograph also is that there was, aside from there being no moonlight and no artificial source of light presence, it's clear enough that obviously this being and the light, the orb, flashed in so quickly it had to be in a fraction of a second.
Right.
Because if you look at those of you who want to go to the website at CSETI.org and look at this picture, you'll see that the blankets and sleeping bags that are draped on these chairs that are in our circle, or you can see every crease and fold in them. You can actually see the individual leaves on the bush that's to the right of this orb. And you can actually see the being hovering above the third chair on the right, to the right side of this picture frame. Now, what's a fascinating thing is that when you zoom in on it and you see, you can see there is a head, a chest, and arms, and two legs. The right leg of the ET is bent 45 degrees behind him. It obviously looks like a male. It's very human-looking, except it's not human because you look at the distance between the eyes, which are wearing a type of night vision goggles, and the top of his head is about 3 times higher than the distance between human eyes and the top of our head. He has an enormous cranium. And on top of his cranium is a disc-like white object that is a transdimensional energy projection system that enables him to be teleported there transdimensionally. I'm going to get into the science behind this in a minute for those of you who are interested. You may want to listen. Now, he's hovering right above that third chair, just outside the circle. Now, in that area, now what's interesting about this is that he's looking straight at the camera.
Right.
There's no question when you look at this. This is not a hoax, my friends. I mean, the debunkers are going to try to say, this can't be, it can't be, it can't be. Let me tell you, it is. I will bet my life on it. I would stake my everything on it. I was there. Linda was there. We know who took the picture. We were there when it was taken. This is an actual ET visiting us in Joshua Tree National Park. And
right.
Now, what's interesting about this being is that you can see his mouth. He's got a slight smile. You can see his nose is brighter than the rest of his head because it's sticking out and being illumined in the orb. As you're looking at him, the left side of his face, his right face, is much brighter than the other side of his face because it's in the shadow of this sort of transdimensional light and orb. And his left arm is in the air almost like he's waving at the camera, and his right hand is at his waist. And he has a very distinct forehead with two ridges on it, and indented. The centers between the two ridges on his forehead have these indented areas, very unusual sort of shape to his forehead, very much not human, but yet the skin color is like that of a Caucasian. He's clearly a humanoid being, and it is the single most amazing photograph I've ever seen in my since I was a child looking into this subject and studying this subject. He's got boots on both of his feet. You can see, you can actually see the heels, and you can see the left leg very clearly. Now, what's interesting about this is that, of course, this is a being that's not from this star system, not Homo sapien, not human, and yet he's very humanoid. And he's there interacting with the group. And this is the kinds of things that we've seen when we see these really rapid bursts of light and orbs that appear, and then we'll see a scintillating form, the shape of a humanoid, but with the naked eye you don't really see quite clearly the sort of flesh and blood, I hate to use that term, aspect of it. This photograph is like a flesh and blood photograph. And remember, this is an ordinary camera. There's no flash bulb on it. It's not infrared. It's not night scope. It's a regular camera that was set on the shutter opening long enough that it gave him a chance to come in, zip in, and sort of come into linear space-time, into this three-dimensional reality, and pose and wave at the camera and look straight into the lens of the camera. And that is astonishing. That is absolutely, and this is a wake-up call of what's coming, because it's going to go from this to further and further expressed contact. But they're sort of using our group as an entryway, and this is why we're sharing this, to prepare the world for the open contact that's coming between humanity and Earth and these other amazing interstellar civilizations that are around the Earth and concerned with the evolution of life on Earth and humanity's destiny. And so this ET who came to Joshua Tree while we were asking the ETs to gather, and by the way, we saw many of these sort of brilliant orbs and lights flash in, but in this case, Raven asked the ETs to appear when she would be holding the shutter open. Now, it's interesting because the other pictures just show black desert. There's nothing. Because,
the pictures that she took before and after this one, she took a sequence.
She took a whole sequence, and the ones before and after, it's just dark. There's nothing there at all because no one had flashlights on, no one had anything.
Right.
And I also want to point out, because there's been some confusion about this, since the photograph was released a couple days ago, is that some people say, well, maybe it's some lights hitting a tree or something. Where this ET appeared, he chose the one spot that's open and clear desert for as far as the eye can see to the horizon.
Absolutely.
Because as you're looking at where this ET being is, because we went out and measured everything exactly and precisely. We spent 2 hours doing it. The bush is to the left of the ET, about 8 feet. So he's 8 feet to the right of the bush. There is a Joshua tree about 8.5 feet further to the right off the frame.
Right.
And between those two things, there's nothing there. It's open desert for as far as I can see. There is no chance that this is some sort of artifact anomaly of some kind of light shining on something, because in that area, from the level of the chairs up, if you're sitting from where Raven took this picture, it's open air for as far as the eye can see across flat desert. There are no other trees and bushes. And the other thing is that one person said, well, it's the moonlight shining on something. If you go and look at November 17th on the calendar, it was a new moon with no moon. There was no zero moonlight. There was no, in fact, it was so dark that in the photograph you can actually see Mars in the upper left corner of the frame.
And you could see Mars with the naked eye, but if you'll notice the orb that's illuminating the chairs and this ET, making it possible on purpose for this to appear on film or on digital camera. I mean, this was done on purpose by the ETs so it would be captured by the digital camera. But you can see that little orb. It's almost as bright as Mars.
That's
you can see it. It showed up in the photo, but it was not visible with the naked eye because I was looking right there when she took the pictures, just like she was. There was pitch darkness over there.
Well, or if it was
so
visible,
quick.
It may have been so quick you didn't notice.
Yeah, it was too quick.
See, one of the problems is that the optic nerve and the mind can only see things with a certain time interval and this is, of course, how subliminal things are done in films, where they put things in the film, but it's so fast you don't see it.
Yeah.
You don't note it. Well, we're dealing with technologies here where an extraterrestrial civilization whose technologies are by definition, let's go back to the first part of this discussion, is by definition they have to have the capability to vibrate, resonate, have a frequency faster than the speed of light, so that their spacecraft and all the people in it shift in a quantum leap beyond the speed of light into really other dimensions, if you will, transdimensionally, and then reappear in another point in space-time. That's what this is. In this case, the craft was transdimensionally shifted out in the field that we had been seeing, and our detectors, all of our electromagnetic detectors were going bananas. We're out in the middle of this 800,000-acre national park, and we had magnetometers that were pinging off the scale, measuring the magnetic field flux, very anomalous things. We had radar and laser detectors and other detectors and going completely nonlinear off their scale and locking on.
We had temperature gauges, thermometers.
Yes, and we had a temperature change happen where this object came around us, and it went from about 36 degrees to 69 degrees out in the open desert with a wind blowing, because of the thermal effect of the density of this transdimensional craft coming close to us and etherically, if you will, occupying the space and warming it up. It was very welcome because it was quite a chilly night. But the point is, this is the kind of things that are going on. And what's exciting about this is that it demonstrates a number of things when we start looking at how an ET civilization can appear very enigmatically and quickly. Now, of course, the ET didn't need to appear just when the shutter was open, but we had invited them to come, and Raven had asked them to use her camera and the timing of her reflexes of taking the pictures to appear, and they did. And this started at the Outer Banks in 2009, a few months ago, in April or early May of 2009. She had the idea to do this, and that's when this ET craft appeared in broad daylight right off of our deck. We rent this big oceanfront house at the Outer Banks of North Carolina, out in the Atlantic Ocean. And this craft appeared. Now, again, she didn't see anything with the naked eye, but clear as a bell, there's a disc right off over the ocean from the deck of the house hovering there.
Right.
And that's when it started. And then, by the way, as I mentioned, you can go to CSETI.org and see we're going to take a training group and a diplomatic mission back to the Outer Banks in April. I forget the date.
April 11th through 17th this year.
Yeah, April 11th through 17th. And we're going to be at this same site where this ET craft appeared and was photographed last year in 2009. So what's fascinating is the interactivity that happens with both consciousness and technology, because, again, this is a digital camera. It's not like it's photographing ghosts. It's photographing something that has to be there, but it was there very quickly in this dimension. And then it went beyond the crossing point of light, the speed of light, and wasn't visible, but was present because the electronic detectors kept going off.
Right. They did.
Okay, so what I'm saying, what I'm describing here is that what you want to begin to visualize is imagine having the ability to take a solid, say a person in a spacecraft, and it's solid in its material and it's physical, and then create a set of electronics where you can shift all the matter and the electrons and everything in it, and shift it at a frequency where it raises, where it goes beyond the frequency and the speed of electrons and matter, and phases into another dimension. Now imagine being able to be between dimensions, and this is going to get into some very interesting thoughts here, where it's sort of like a rheostat, where you turn the dial on a radio, where you're going, an old-fashioned radio, where you're going up and down the AM or FM dial, and there are different hertz, which are frequencies. And at one frequency, you get one radio station. At another one, you get another one. But there could be something where you're in between, and you might hear 2 or 3 stations at the same time. What the ETs have the ability to do is to be completely materialized in linear space-time, completely dematerialized, way beyond the speed of light, where there'd be no detectability in linear space-time, and then they can be between dimensions or begin to bleed into linear space-time or just blip in very quickly, which is what this ET did, obviously, in the photograph, because it's an authentic photograph, the provenance of which is not in question at all.
Right.
We were right there when it was taken, and it was witnessed, and there's no question about what this is. When you look at this photograph, it is astounding because it's an ET visiting us, waving and looking right into the camera, greeting us. And this is something amazing to behold. And one of the things that it says to me is, I founded CSETI 20 years ago this year, in 1990, and it says to me that the time for the unveiling of the truth, the end of secrecy, the full known presence that we're not alone in the universe, that we're part of a cosmic family of civilizations, and that we're at this cosmic moment where we're going to jump into cosmic awareness and a cosmic culture. This is all upon us. And that's what I meant when I first said earlier in this discussion that the veil is becoming quite thin, and the time is quite short in terms of when these amazing changes are going to happen. And because it's one thing for an ET spacecraft to show up and be photographed, and we have many of those. If you get the book Contact, Countdown to Transformation, you'll see many of these that we've had encounters with over the years. And we've had also ETs briefly appear and dematerialize around us, but for one to actually pose for the camera and blip in and out of space-time like this is an order of magnitude. This is a new era. I don't mean to overstate it, but it's a whole new paradigm. And because, again, we're not just talking about their machinery, which everyone gets kind of fixated on because we're so materialistic and we're so into gear and equipment and airplanes and things, but this is a person, and it's clearly not a human person, and he's clearly there, very close to us, greeting us. And what does that mean? What does this mean about the near future? It's so exciting. It's just breathtaking, really. It's mind-boggling. The first time we actually saw this picture, and I was literally up till 4 a.m. looking at it on a big screen. I have to say, one thing you may want to do is burn this to a disk or something and look at it on a good, or plug your computer into a good high-definition TV or screen. It is much more impressive on a high-quality, high-definition screen than just the usual, cheap computer screen that's on your laptop or tabletop computer. But even on those, even the printed pictures that I have here off the screen are just unbelievable. And and yet I want everyone to know they're real. And it has enormous meaning in terms of, because what's happening here is that the ETs know, of course, with the briefings that we've sent to the Obama administration, there's a major G7 country that is wanting us to help set up a meeting between their head of state and these ETs that we're still in contact with very actively, that they're wanting to have open contact, but they're wanting to prepare people for it, and they're doing that through what we're doing through CSETI. That's why there was some controversy, I have to tell people, within our team about releasing this information, because it does open us up for all kinds of attacks and ridicules by the Flat Earth Society people who don't want to accept that we're not alone in the universe and don't understand transdimensional physics. But the fact of the matter is, the day has gotten too long. There's not enough time to delay this any further. And I don't think that as head of the Disclosure Project it would be appropriate for me to withhold this kind of evidence. And we won't. I think it's very important that people understand this has all been released in good faith. But you need to understand what it means, not only in terms of the physics behind transdimensionality, where you have what looks like an orb, a light source, holding a cone of light, and in the cone of light is this extraterrestrial floating above just at the outside of our circle, our contact circle in Joshua Tree National Park. Now, I will tell you that we just got back from an expedition at Boca Grande Island in the Gulf of Mexico, and we had multiple of these beings show up there, and several of them also photographed with no flash bulb and no special lenses, just with the lens being left open for however many seconds, sometimes 5, sometimes 10 seconds, but on a tripod. And they're different beings. And this is something that we're in the process of trying to study and be sure it's, what we think it is, but this is all going to be coming out. It is very exciting. And again, we were having nonstop electromagnetic contact through our detectors. We had a whole series of downloads like the Orion transmissions that started in 2007 and have continued up to the present day at Joshua Tree with the electronics. And we had amazing objects that appeared in the sky above us, but also right in the middle of the circle, some of which were photographed and were quite sizable, including ET beings that were within a foot or two of the camera. So this is something that is really kind of amazing that this is happening. And what it says to me, and I think that the message in this is they're wanting us to be ready because here it comes. It's like, y'all ready for this? Lord, yeah. Now this is, and it also means that the time of sort of perseverating and delaying and procrastinating and keeping all of this stuff secret is coming to an end. And that is a whole new era in human civilization, because with the knowledge that we're not alone in the universe, it's also going to come the knowledge of the sciences of these technologies. And when that comes out, it's goodbye oil, goodbye gas, goodbye coal, goodbye petrodollar, goodbye current macroeconomic order that requires most of the world be slaves to the current system. I think that it's an enormous change that's coming, and we all need to be aware of it and embrace it and be prepared for it, and also be the facilitators of it. I think we all have to become the sort of vehicles for the information to our fellow human beings out of compassion and say, look, here's the truth. We're not alone in the universe. They're here, and they're ready to open this whole reality to humanity. They've been very, very behind the scenes and sort of kept a comfortable distance. In a sense, seeing a UFO or a machine in the sky or even landed in a field. But when you have this kind of visitation of an ET on a diplomatic team like ours at this proximity being photographed, this says that there's a acceleration of change. There's an acceleration of contact happening that is truly historic. And that's why we wanted this photograph released, so that you would understand that. And then contemplate, well, how do you prepare yourself for contact? What do you need to do? And that's why we put together the information and the training materials that you can go to disclosureproject.org and see what those are. You can come on one of these expeditions. We only do 4 or 5 of these a year. But of course, that there are opportunities for people to come for a week and be out under the sky with us and learn not only the meditation techniques and the remote viewing techniques, but also the contact techniques that are more than just remote viewing or using lasers or using tones. It's a whole paradigm of diplomatic contact, because, the interesting thing about this is that Hillary Clinton and the President of the United States and the President of the United Kingdom and France and China and Russia and Canada and all the other countries of the world and their foreign ministries and State Departments do not have a diplomatic mission to these visitors. And the UN doesn't either. So who's doing it? Well, we have to. And so it's a citizens' diplomacy effort. I mean, I have no official standing, and really, frankly, I'm not interested in official standing. But I think that all of us need to sort of deputize ourselves to be ambassadors of universal peace and from humanity to these civilizations, because they're here. And they're waiting for a response that's appropriate. And when I say appropriate, I mean not like what they've been getting for 60 years from the military, which has been shooting at them and developing weapon systems and developing scalar electromagnetic systems that target their spacecraft when they materialize and come into orbit, etc. And this is happening. And I think that, unfortunately, there is a rogue, sort of out-of-control group that wants to be able to control this issue, and they're not going to be able to, because here we were, a group of people with nominal funding, with rather simple equipment, out in a national park that anyone can go to, using these protocols that now any of you can learn, and these ET beings are showing up and actually are photographed. What is that saying? Well, I think that's a message, and I can tell you that this photograph has gone straight to the CIA and other people who are looking at it, and I know the people over there, and they're going, holy cow, because what it means is that all of us can take the destiny of the human future into our own hands and not be dependent on Big Brother to do it for us. It's really a message of empowerment. Because, I've always said, look, I'm a country doctor originally from North Carolina. Everyone on my team are people who are, Linda's a plant biologist. Dr. Bravo is a fellow emergency physician, as I am. Dr. Loader, who's been with us on these expeditions, is a university professor in chemistry and oceanography and life sciences and oceanography. Raven Nabulsi is an acupuncturist and doctor of Chinese medicine. Trudy Geiker, who's with us on all of these, is an amazing remote viewer and what have you, is a housewife whose husband worked for years at Los Alamos National Laboratories. And there's just people from all walks of life. It's not as if anyone involved in this operation and who was present at this event are officials with any government. Maybe that's why they're so happy, because they know that we're free of the nonsense that goes on with that. Now, what we want to do, however, is model this so that we begin to have appropriate responses from the leadership of the world. And we're hoping that President Obama and Gordon Brown and President Sarkozy and Medvedev of Russia and the Premier of China and others begin to do something constructive on this front, because there is a rogue international group handling this in the most violent military way. And that's why I think that if all of you listening think, well, what can I do about this? It's so fascinating. I mean, it's very futuristic in a sense, but it's really very now. And it's been very now for 50 years. And how do we respond? And that we actually, can respond. And that's what's beautiful. It's very empowering, this concept of a close encounter of the fifth kind, which is when humans say, I'm going to be a point of contact to these ETs and invite them to interact with us. And you know what? If you do it without prejudice and fear and understanding the ancient sciences of consciousness and mind and what's in the knowledge of the ancient Vedas and Puja, you can do this quite easily, and they will come. They absolutely will come, these ETs.
They work with us. They're doing it on purpose. It's really amazing that these beings from distant galaxies are participating with us, and they're doing it, together with us, and it's so incredible. Like this being, you can tell, that he was there looking right at the camera. And even with a little smile, it wasn't like he was just floating by and the camera happened to catch him passively. This is all interactive. They work with our technology. They work with through the circuitry of our radar detectors, our magnetometers. Now they're beginning. I mean, they understand what's to them incredibly low tech, digital photography. But they work with our cameras. They know a split second exposure is with enough light is what's necessary to show themselves on our cameras, and so they're doing this stuff on purpose to work with us.
Right, and they know that then we will then provide this as to the public and to millions of people who are following what we're doing. The one thing I also want to point out: some people say, well, why don't they just fully materialize and land and come out and shake your hand? Well, we actually have had at this exact site. We had 4 ETs actually materialize physically and then dematerialize one time. We did have a craft float right over us. It made this weird sound. It was going like a didgeridoo almost, and it was about 15 feet above our heads, literally.
Right.
Now, what's interesting, though, is that those happened very quickly when we were all in deep meditation and in a state of cosmic consciousness together. This, we were standing around when this happened,
right,
and okay with people taking pictures. What's interesting also about this is that every time we've had an ET craft fully materialize over the park there, within minutes we've had jets that come in from some of the military installations, particularly Edwards Air Force Base, scrambled into the national park a couple hundred feet above the ground, illegally, frankly, below FAA requirements, certainly over a national park, with electronic gear all over them that we have actually photographed. They've come in right, as well as big helicopters. So the ETs know that, when I'm doing an operation like this, that there are satellites and other monitoring systems that are monitoring what we're doing. And there is a certain risk to them being fully materialized in three-dimensional space-time for any length of time, because we've shot down and killed hundreds of them. I'm just going to put it out there. But it isn't stopping the contact. You see what I'm saying? Even though when we have had them fully materialize, we've had some pretty amazing military force projection right into our area. It isn't going to stop us. It's absolutely never going to stop us. But the ETs also know that there's no point since doing something too overt that would result in a catastrophe that could get a lot of people killed as well. So they're doing this in the most compassionate and safest way possible, but still providing the evidence that the world needs to have. It's kind of beautiful when you think about it. It's very beautiful. Now, one other thing I want to mention is that when you look at this picture, some people have found that when they get the data from the picture, you can kind of click on and get the camera information. It has the wrong time date stamp, because Raven usually takes the battery out of the camera when she's not using it over long periods of time, and it goes back to a default date back in 2003, but that's not the date. I mean, some people have been confused, but the date was November 17, 2009 is when the photo was actually taken. The date stamp is wrong, because Raven, like most of us, when my batteries are out of the can. I don't go back through the manual and look up how to set the date and time properly. I mean, we should, but in this case it didn't. And so if you see that, don't be confused by it. It's just a matter of the fact that she's often taking the batteries out of the camera, and then when it restarts, it has a default date of, I guess, its manufacturer date or when it was first put into use.
But we know for sure what date it was taken. You know how all the digital photos that you take are numbered consecutively, and she had obviously a whole bunch of other pictures before and after this one for all the previous days, and we know where we were when those pictures were taken, this and that. We know what night this happened, and et cetera. So, I mean, we know for sure that was the date this picture was taken.
Oh, yes, and we remember all the things that happened leading up to it, because
yes.
What's another thing that's interesting, when you look at that orb that's in the photograph on the left, it's exactly where we heard this group of ET voices speaking. And it wasn't just one or two people imagining it. A whole bunch of people heard them.
Right.
And I distinctly heard a male voice. And this is definitely a male ET when you look at him. You
right.
can actually see his hairline. And
he's a total guy.
Yeah, it's a guy. It's a male. But very different looking is his head and face from a human, and yet very humanoid. 2 arms, 2 legs, a body, the 2 eyes, the mouth, the nose, the ears you can see, and then these interesting kind of Mr. Magoo goggles, these round sort of blackish, greenish goggles, which have been described, and I think they're sort of a night vision, but probably 1,000 times more advanced than anything that we have. By the way, night vision technology was a reverse engineering spinoff of the crashed ET craft that we studied, along with fiber optics and a few other things like lasers. This is something we've learned from our military contacts. So, the way that this ET being is hovering there in this cone of light coming from this orb is rather unmistakable. And again, it is not a hoax. So
and there's like a swirling energy field also. You might want to.
Yeah, all around him you can see this swirling energy field. And someone said, "Oh, it looks like angel's wings," but it's actually because he's materializing very quickly and briefly into linear space-time, and there's sort of a swirl from his. As you look at him from the right, and then it continues towards his foot on the bottom, and there's sort of a counterclockwise swirling energy that he's in the center of. It's very, very interesting, and it's all part of the transdimensional electronics that allow for what I called for years sort of electronic astral projection. It's like when you have a lucid flying dream. If you could control for that, where your body was being teleported faster than the speed of light and then stepping down into linear space-time periodically through an electronic system, that's what this is. That's what this is demonstrating. And the report I wrote up is a description of that. So I think we're about out of time. And what I'd like to say is that I hope people, as you go to CSETI.org and look at this, you will read the full report and look at the measurements and look at this and under really good quality, high-definition TV, and contemplate what this means. It's really historic, and it's an opening of a whole new era. And I hope those of you who can free up some time and spend a week with us at the Outer Banks in April, or we're going to be in Crestone, Colorado, in the San Luis Valley, the Mysterious Valley in June, and some of the other events that are coming up. We're going to have also expeditions in August at Mount Shasta, and also at Joshua Tree again next November. But we're going to have another 3-day event with a couple hundred people to do mass contact and meditation under the stars in Rio Rico in Arizona in October. So all of that is on the CSETI.org website and also at disclosureproject.org. So hope to see you at those events soon. And I'd like again to thank the World Puja Network for sponsoring us and having us here to share with you these amazing developments. And I'd like to thank Linda Willitts for joining me here with Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer.
And thank you.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.